Alrighty, we are officially a month into 2025, which means I would like to show you my journal setup for the year. I'm trying to remember what the measurements and everything of this particular journal were because I did get it resale, but it's Archer and Olive, and what I really like about them is the fact that they have vegan leather because I like the feel and the style of this. But if you're like vegetarian or vegan like I am, then you can't get regular leather journals. It's also, I think the A5, it's the bigger size. So like you can see it's definitely larger than my hand. It's 160 GSM and it is dot grid. Now, when I originally made this, I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube and got really excited about making my journal and then massively messed up on this entire first portion right here. So I'm going to show you what I did with that. But moral of the story is if you mess up, you can just glue stuff over the pages. We'll go ahead and get into it. I'm going to do a flip through and show you what I have and then also how I filled it in for January. I thought about doing a video right after I had completely done the setup before I'd filled anything in, but I kind of wanted to see what it looked like. So starting off here at the front, I don't have a cover page because like I said, I messed up. Maybe I'll do something here eventually, but I just haven't yet, maybe here as well. But we start out in this area that I messed up on with Magical Readathon. If you don't know what Magical Readathon is, it is a readathon kind of almost role play reading game that's hosted by Book Roast. So if you want to go look up their channel, you're more than welcome to, and then you'll just type in Orilium, Eldia, or Magical Readathon. It'll pop up on YouTube. They are one of my favorite YouTubers. So they've created this world. I'm not going to go into it. If you're interested, you can go look into it yourself. But I wanted to have all of the information here in my reading journal. So starting off, I have Orilium, which is the map of the school, and then the continent that we're on is Eldia. I've also got pockets and printed out all of the information. The way that I did this is I basically typed into Google the measurements for an A5 journal, and then in Canva, I created those measurements on a paper and just posted everything onto Canva with the correct sizes for this to be cut out, and then just scaled down everything else. But here we've got the brief history of the world. When I flip the page, we have more information about the world. So we've got the people, we've got the guilds, we've got the different legacies and things. And I like the idea of having all of this information right here so that I can flip through. I also really like telling my friends about Magical Readathon, and whenever I do, it's nice to be able to just kind of whip out my reading journal and show them all of the information to give them a feel for what's happening. Because while it's fun reading in an online community, it's also fun reading in a local community. And being able to do the activities together is a super good time. I do have a friend who's participating in this part of the Magical Readathon with me at the very least. So this is the Adventures in Eldia. It's a TBR game that you can play for the entire year. It's basically a choose your path model. So I have printed out a map that I'm able to actually draw on so I can circle what I'm reading for the month and follow along with it. And I keep that in here. And then for the month of January, the book that I read to fill in the prompt was Interesting Facts About Space. So I went ahead and I printed out a little cover of the book that I read. And then on the back side, I have the month that I read this book, the spot that I went to. When we eventually get the storyline in March, then I'll add that here. And then for the prompt, it was simply read a book written in 2024. So I'm keeping all of the information on here as well, just because it's an additional fun thing to have in the journal. The next two pages are just open spaces that I've left for when we do the equinoxes. I'm not sure how I'll fill these in yet, but I wanted to make sure that I had the area available. And then the last page is the map of Eldia itself with all of the continents. I've got the map of the school again. And then I went ahead and on top of the pocket, I created in Canva a point system guide. You can see that I've already written over a couple of things because it wasn't accurate. All of this information is in the Google Drive by Book Roast, but it was easier for me to just kind of list everything out at a glance. Now, it's not completely accurate, so if you're trying to base your own point system off of this, I do recommend going and looking at the Google Drive. But what I've got in this pocket is a little bit different from the others because that was the history and stuff. So I've got my point tracker. That way I can keep track of everything that I've read, what I'm doing, so I can spend my points in the Guild Emporium because yes, I think that is super exciting and I love the idea of that. I've got my scholar's key with my character information, and then I've got the little packets for the side quest printed out. So as I complete different options there, then I can go ahead and I can like have that information available. So I know, for instance, I know it's upside down, but that's reminding me that I haven't quite completed this yet. But I know that I'm going to be reading Water Moon for this prompt, so I've gone ahead and printed that out. Glued Water Moon right here. It's coming in on my Libby in like a week. So this will be a February read for me. And then once I've read this, I'll flip this page over and print the next page out with the next prompt, because they're storylines and they're fun, and I like being able to go back and reread them. So that's everything that goes in this pocket. And that's also the section for Magical Readathon that got glued in to cover up all of the stuff that I did at the beginning of my journal that I actually ended up hating. And when we get to the very end of the video, I'll show you exactly what I did that made me pause and stop and go, no, I hate this. Something needs to change. So when we flip the page, I do have a table of contents to start the next section. I'm not sure how I feel about this, and I don't know how much I'll use this, but I did want it in my 2025 journal. This is basically going to be a trial journal for what I actually do enjoy and what I don't really use for what happens in 2026. When I flip the page, I've got my bookshelf reading tracker. My goal for this year is 100 books. So I have a little over 100 on here. That way, if I surpass my goal, I've got a little bit of leeway in order to continue coloring in my books. I see people do this different ways. I've seen coloring the books in by format. I've seen coloring the books in by mood and how you felt primarily when you were reading that book. I do quarter-star ratings, and I did want mine to be based on the rating. Now, the first thing you're probably thinking to yourself is, Taylor, how in the world are you able to actually tell with the colors so close? Here's the thing, guys. Originally, I picked colors that were very different from one another out of my pencil box because this whole thing was like, what do I have laying around the house? That's what I'm going to use. I didn't go buy anything. So I was using the pencil set that I had. Chose very different colors. It looked really bad. That's part of the mistake option that happened up here. And I was like, wow, this is going to be really ugly actually when it's all colored in. So I decided I was going to go with purples and I was going to go with blues. And then when I started actually using the colors here, I was like, you can't tell them apart. The main thing is going to be at the end of the year when I look at this, anything that's more purple maroon is going to be a higher star rating, and anything that's more blue is a lower star rating. So my blue colors start off at like 3.25 stars. It's going to be like an at a glance section. Of course, I love dragons, obviously, from my profile names. So we had to have our dragon here. Everything throughout the book is going to be like purple apothecary themed. And then I do think it'll be nice to be able to come back in here at the very end of the year and kind of write down how many 5-star reads did I have, 4.75, yada yada, just for like an at a glance for the entire year. So this won't be filled in until the very last day of 2025 with my star totals. Next up, we have my coloring goal for 100 books in 2025. All the colors that you see in here are going to be based on this key. This was just something that I don't know, it brings me pleasure filling in different things in this journal. It's very therapeutic to come home at night and just like fill in different stuff. So every single time I finish a book, I color it in with the rating that I gave it. We have it all the way up to 100. If I want to add extra boxes later, then I can, but I'm not doing that right now. This was a page that I messed up on because this is not pages read per month. This is actually days read per month. Eventually, I'll go back in and change this, but I've just been too lazy to do it so far. So for January, you can see all of the days that I read throughout the month. Again, I am coloring this in after I've finished the book with the stars the star rating that I gave the book. And then we have my year at a glance. I can't remember which YouTuber I saw do this, but I loved their Dutch door where they had the calendar for the entire year and then they were writing in the books that they read every single day. I know that some people write in the books that they've read, like the titles over here. My handwriting is not small enough for that, but being able to look at January really quickly and see exactly which books I read just at a glance is fun. The one thing I will say about this is I tend to read multiple books at a time, and for some reason that didn't happen in January until I read All the Water in the World and Funny Story at the same time, and it made me go, oh gosh, if these books are two different colors, I don't know what I'm going to do here, because it made my brain fritz a little. The thought of like cutting it in half and coloring it in differently for funny story and differently for all the water in the world, they ended up being the same star rating. So I didn't have to worry about it. But I think moving forward, I might actually color the entire calendar in different, in the same color, and just choose probably the color I use for single player, because I actually really like that, since I've already got the star ratings everywhere else. But this was really cool and really fun, and it was actually a lot of fun to make as well. I didn't do the days of the week at the top. I just filled it in for how many days are in the month. So this isn't necessarily, what would that be, Thursday. This is just, how the pattern that I used worked out. I've seen some people doing the A to Z challenge as well. I want to try more challenges this year because I didn't do really any challenges last year except for Magical Readathon. So I'm incorporating a lot more into my journal. The A to Z challenge is something that was really easy to put in, and I think that it looks cute. And then I'm going to go in and glue all of these different things that I have on other pages. These are not stickers because I don't have sticker books. It's just stuff that I found on Canva and printed out. Next up is my 2025 bingo. This is like a combination of prompts that I've seen on challenges, on things that I really want to challenge myself to read more of, such as a translated novel. What was the other thing that I was like really, really excited to? Oh, a perspective shift. I like books that really challenge my perspective of the world, and that like at the end of it sends me into a research hole where I end up having a perspective shift. So this one I was excited about. And then there are others that are just things that I personally enjoy. I wanted them on the bingo. So I like reading from a villain's POV, and I like reading from an unreliable narrator. So this is a combo of a bunch of different things over here. Next up are my monthly stats. So I have from January all the way down through December, and these are the things that I will be tracking throughout the entire year. When we get to my January reviews in the January section of the journal, you'll see where I'm tracking all of this like in a single page. The only thing that won't be on that particular section is how many days I read that month. You guys have already seen that page. Next up, we have my 2025 book tournament. You're going to notice none of this is filled in, and it's because I keep teetering between whether I want to make the tournament for the winning book of each month, or if I want to make the tournament between my 5-star reads. Because every single month I will have a book that was my favorite, and that's going to be this page right here. But my favorite book for that month may not necessarily be a 5-star read. So like in January, I didn't have a single 5-star read, but let's say in April, I have 3. And so right before I started drawing this in, I paused because I was like, I might not actually want to do this like a book tournament of my favorite books of the month. I might want to do it as a book tournament of my favorite books of 2025, period. So this probably will not be filled in until December. It's just going to stay like this as I read and figure out what my star ratings look like. Obviously, I just showed you guys this. It's the book of the month. I printed out the book for January. My favorite book was A Power Unbound, which was the last book in a trilogy by Freya Marsk. It's a fantasy romance. I highly recommend the entire trilogy. It's so good. And I did think book 3 was the best book of the trilogy. The last thing that I have here before we get to my final reading challenge is a year in books. This is another thing. All of this is stuff that I've taken from other YouTubers. Like none of this is an original idea. I want to be very clear about that. I just kind of grasped the things that really struck me and then put them into my personal journal. So for this, I'm just putting in every single cover of the books that I picked up in a month so that I can come back and I can, again, at a glance, see what I was reading, get an idea of, what was interesting to me in those months, and then also what was coming in on my Libby, because so much of my reading in 2025 is going to be me like putting books on hold and then waiting for months for them to come in. This is also going to include books that aren't going to be noticed anywhere else, and that's my DNFs. So for instance, Bittersweet and the Hollow is not going to be actually included in any stats anywhere except for on my online spreadsheet, which I'll talk about at the very end. But it was a DNF for me. It had nothing to do with the book and everything to do with the audiobook narrator. I don't have any comments about the actual craft, prose, plot of this. I couldn't listen to the narrator. So that one was a DNF. I don't know if I'll ever get the physical copy. But DNFs won't be actually listed anywhere else in my book journal. And then again, I counted this out to make sure that I would have plenty of space for at least 100 books and then a few more. The last thing that we have in kind of the front general section of the journal is the 52 Book Club's Reading Challenge for 2025. So this is essentially 52 book prompts that as you are reading, you fill in throughout the year of 2025. Obviously, you know, one book per prompt. You can't fill out 3 different prompts using the same book. And then I am tracking all of this here, but I'm also tracking it on the story graph as well. I've got a pocket because as I'm reading, I have a printout of the challenge and then I'm circling the ones that I've completed. That way I can just like open my book journal and know exactly which ones if I don't have my phone on me or my digital tracking on the story graph in front of me. And then also, like I said, I just really enjoy filling out things in my journal. But just like a year in Eldia, I couldn't remember the name of the challenge from the beginning of the journal for a second. I'm printing out the cover of the books that I've read that fit different prompts, and then on the back, putting the number for the prompt, what the prompt actually is. So this one is Shares a Universe with prompt number 28. This was like a twofer situation. And then I just went ahead and put the title because that was important in this one. In this one, you'll see it's a little different. So I have Pale Almeida's Romance Revenge Plot. Prompt number was 21. The prompt was character's name and the title. The character's name was Pale Almeida. So it's the prompt and then what made it actually fit the prompt, not necessarily the book title. And these all just go in my fun little pocket here because it's cute and I saw somebody else do it and I wanted to be able to have a pocket with all of my books. And finally, we are into our January stats. So at the very beginning of every single month, I'm going to have a page that looks like this where I can keep all of my numbers for what I'm tracking. So I'm tracking my total pages read, total hours read, how many 5-star reads I had, the series I've started, the series I've continued, and the series I've finished. So like I continued that trilogy this month and then I finished that trilogy this month. I debated how I was going to do this for a while. Like I was like, if I continue the trilogy and finish the trilogy, am I just going to consider it finished? But I was like, no, because each book represents a different category. Book 2 was series continued and book 3 was series finished. So this is how I did it. I think everybody does it a little differently. Do what works for you because it's your book journal. The total books that I've read and then the book of the month, and I printed out that cover and glued it in right here. The reviews and how I did them in the front section is what broke me because I hated the way it looked. And so at that point, after making a couple of different mistakes on other things, I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm going over this. Actually, I almost bought another journal and then I was like, that's financially like irresponsible. You can fix this, Taylor, get it together. So for my reviews of the books, everything that you've seen is printed from Canva, is made in Canva. I'm obsessed with Canva and I love Canva. And if you haven't ever used Canva, it is free. You can pay for the like premium or whatever it is that they call it. Different subscriptions call things different things. I never remember. But I do pay for that because I think it's well worth the money. You don't have to. Canva is a free platform. But for my January reviews, I have the book cover, the star rating. If it is a spice book, then I also have my spice level. And I do on my website have like what each spice level actually means because I've broken down what 2 chili peppers means for me when I'm actually rating the books. For my star ratings, I am using the compile system by Book Roast, the YouTuber that I mentioned earlier. I am obsessed. I have tweaked this a little bit to fit what I specifically look for in a book, but it's essentially the same thing as what they had. I've obviously got my review. Typically, this is what I end up posting on Storygraph as well and Goodreads, but I really like Storygraph. And then I've got the title, the author, the name of the narrator, the genre that it is, the subgenre, if that matters, and then the time or pages of the book. So that's what I'm tracking in my reviews. This is how the layout looks whenever I'm putting these in here. And then if there's a challenge that happens to be specific to that month, then I'll glue that challenge in at the very end. There wasn't any challenge that I did that was specific to January, so there was no challenge to glue in, which means that this page is going to end up looking like my January stats, but for February. And this is it. This is the entire journal. There's a lot of cool stuff that I saw other creators on YouTube have in their journals. There's actually somebody that I saw who like draws maps and had a selection for their maps. Other people include different things beyond just reading in here. And I, as we should, I went through and I chose the things that I think would be the most fun for me to fill out that looks like everything that I'm interested in for challenges and so forth in 2025. Now, there are a lot of things that I'm tracking that aren't necessarily in the journal, and that is because whenever I started completing this call pile system, I went back and I watched that video by Book Roast. And again, you can either type that into YouTube or you can click on my website at the top and go to my rating systems, and I've got that original video linked that talks about the call pile system. But that creator also has a spreadsheet that they have made that you can download and you can track and like collect stats on the spreadsheet. And I have that downloaded and I'm filling that out at the same time that I'm filling out the journal, because just depending on where I'm at when I finish a book, it might be easier for me to get to my journal, or it might be easier for me to get to that spreadsheet and write everything down before I start to forget information or forget initial thoughts when I finish reading the text that I'm reading. But I don't know, for my first journal, I'm actually very excited by it. I love this little window idea that I got from a different creator. It's just fun. It's nice to come home after a stressful day and sit down and like just fill this out and color in your books and do all of your different things. So this is my journal for 2025. I am obsessed. I hope you guys like maybe got some ideas from this and have like thoughts on what you would like to do in your journal. And if you want to share like your favorite book so far that you've read this year, or if you want to share what your particular reading goal is, or like different things that you've done in your journal that I didn't include here, let us know down in the comments, because, you can always add. If somebody puts a challenge that they're doing that's really fun, I will definitely add it to my journal. But yeah, happy reading.